taking over for Mr. John Swafford, longtime ACC commissioner, and most of the challenges center around money, I will say, and mindset. Phillips took over last month. I'm going to comb through this article and hit the high points. We want to credit Andrea Adelson and David Hale for their work on this article. And so Jim Phillips has been touring the ACC, stopping off at campuses, probably most of this done by Zoom, and assessing the ACC. And as he has received his, what they quote as blunt assessments of the league in football, this is strictly a football article. And that's all we talk about here, of course, despite the efforts of some to call in and talk about other things. Football, we talk about football here all the time. Of course, there are some other things, especially when talking ACC. The sport of men's basketball needs to be addressed to a certain extent because it is a basketball conference. But you get the feeling in the assessment of the league that to thrive big time in the more lucrative of the two sports, football is going to have to be emphasized, and they're going to have to shake that tag as a basketball league. ESPN spoke with 16 athletic directors and football coaches from across the league. They all believe that Phillips is the right man for the job. Well, that's easy to say now, but that might be an honest assessment. We don't know. Okay. The trajectory of the conference, though, from a football standpoint, is not amazing. I have stated in recent years that I believe that the ACC, from a recruiting standpoint, is in a good position geographically. Because regardless of where Boston College is and Syracuse and Louisville to a certain extent, but mostly Boston College and Syracuse are the two schools in the league that are not in prime recruiting territory, that everybody else is in a good position to recruit, to stay home and recruit in the region. That mid-Atlantic to southern region for the ACC, they're in better position than the Big Ten to compete in football long-term in terms of where the bodies are. Where is the talent? The talent is in California, Texas, and the Southeast. Most notably, of course, there's talent everywhere to a certain extent, especially in those places in Ohio and Pennsylvania. So the ACC, from a recruiting standpoint, especially following that 2016 season, which they jumped up and were playing on level with the SEC, in that particular year, I thought that they were in good shape to continue that momentum. But they're not bringing in the money. It may surprise some people out there that the SEC is not bringing in, at least in the most recent accounted football season, which would be the 2019 college football season, not 2020. They haven't made that public yet. Going back to 2019, the last full college football season, of course, that the Big Ten per team brought in $7 million more than the SEC. Not than just the ACC, but when comparing the Big Ten and the ACC, you're talking about a gap of over 17. No. More than that. The Big 12 was number 3 at $37 million. The ACC was number 4, and right there with the Pac-12. The Pac-12 and the ACC, we'll get to the exact numbers, but the Big Ten brought in like $25 million per team more than the ACC. The Notre Dame situation in football is going to have to be addressed as well. Phillips is going to be assessing the divisional alignment, which right now isn't working well for the conference. But at the same time, that's not because it was done poorly. Those divisions make sense, generally make sense. It's just a fact that Clemson is dominating. And again, the league's image is of a basketball league. And that's not necessarily good when it comes to the bankroll. So again, Phillips is combing the league, talking to people, talking about television contracts, talking money, talking about football on the field, talking recruiting footprint. support staff. So he's asking about, he said this in the interview with ESPN, that he wanted to get at the issue of recruiting. So right now, as I stated a couple weeks ago, the SEC has the most players in the NFL, of course, but the Big Ten has a decided advantage over the ACC in NFL players. In this most recent NFL season, the SEC was around 330, the Big Ten around 280, and the ACC was just over 200 players in the NFL. And if you take into consideration the number of players per team, then that jumps up the Big 12 because there's only 10 teams in the Big 12 compared to 14. And the Pac-12, there are actually more NFL players per team on the current rosters from the Pac-12 and the Big 12 than the ACC even. The total number looks better for the ACC with the 14 teams, but per team, it's the Pac-12 and the Big 12 as well. So the relevance within the Power Five. Florida State would be mostly to blame. Miami would be even more so to blame because Florida State's been good more recently. But Florida State having fallen off the cliff since 2016-17 in that range. Virginia Tech, certainly under Frank Beamer, was a national player in the 90s into the 2000s up until about 10 years ago, and they've fallen off considerably. That's hurt. Okay, when talking about the financial forces in college football, the Big Ten and the SEC rule college football. Okay. Based on the current TV deals driving most of this number, the Big Ten brought in $54 million last season per team. The SEC, $45 million. The Big 12 was third at $37 million. Then you'd have to run through the numbers to get the exact between the Pac-12 and the ACC. The ACC was still slightly above. The Pac-12 saw a small increase in total revenue in 2019, $3 million more per team than the ACC. So the ACC was last in 2019. So it went Big Ten, $54 million, SEC, $47 million, Big 12, $37 million, Pac-12, $30 million, ACC, $27 million. So the Big Ten brought in twice as much money per team and therefore overall than the ACC. Do 27 times 14, somebody out there. 27 times 14 is 270 times, it's somewhere around 350 million. So the Big Ten was around 700 million. And so what's going to make this worse for the ACC is that the television contract for the ACC runs through 2036. So they will not fully renegotiate until 2036, where the SEC just signed a new TV deal with ESPN, a new 10-year deal that is further going to increase the revenue starting in 2024, just 3 football seasons from now. And then the Big Ten's current deal runs out in 2022-23. So in January of 23, which is only 2 years away, which is only roughly 1.5 years away, the Big Ten will be able to renegotiate. So the Big Ten and the SEC in the next 2 years are going to go out of sight financially, and the ACC is going to continue to lag behind. Now, while the current contract for the ACC runs out in 2036, there's an opportunity for the ACC. They have a window in there to do it's like a check-in window to basically say, hey, we're doing better than the contract would stipulate. Can we get some more money? But that doesn't sound like it's going to be significant. The conference, meaning the ACC, is not immune to financial woes caused by the pandemic. Okay. The pandemic hit every conference, but not equally. And the more money you have when you're a have versus a have not, the Big Ten and the SEC were more prepared to handle the pandemic and the hit than the ACC. At Virginia Tech, for example, athletic director Whit Babcock said the athletic department took in about $47 million less in revenue. Now, they made a lot of cuts and made adjustments, and so they're only going to take about a $15 million hit at Virginia Tech, but that sounds like that's going to be one of the better results for the ACC, is a $15 million loss for one school. Most of those losses per team, per athletic program in the ACC is going to be between 20 and 40 million. All right. Now, one positive possibly for the ACC that at least mitigates this, if this is accurate, that it says another ACC AD offered similar thoughts on spending. Sure, the SEC has more money coming in, but several SEC schools are spending that revenue before the checks have cleared. A smarter approach to spending, investing in assets with a financial return over gaudy new facilities, avoiding massive buyouts after bad coaching hires can offset some of the gap between the ACC and the SEC. So he's basically saying, let's not fire coaches with huge buyouts, and let's not invest in ridiculous new facilities. But while that some of that might be valid to circumvent some of that gap, you do want to have gaudy facilities to bring in the great recruits and prepare your football teams to win games. And every conference is going to have is going to make mistakes in the hiring process. So he's basically saying, reduce the margin of error. And that's great. That's a great approach. You should try to do that. Florida State, Virginia Tech, and Louisville are combined at 12 and 19 in the past few seasons. So the ACC network did not get off to a good start in regards to having an impressive or shiny new product on the football field to present. And then there's the image issue, as we addressed off the top. Basketball, men's basketball rules the ACC. Duke, North Carolina, they're at the base of the conference. The conference is housed in North Carolina. The ACC network is generally in North Carolina, although many of those facilities moved to Bristol, Connecticut in the last couple of years. Much of it is operational in Charlotte, but more so the league offices are in North Carolina. North Carolina's basketball country. The ACC is ruled in basketball in the past, and therefore there's still a mindset that college basketball is number one. And that probably hurts the perception of the football league. It does. Doesn't probably hurt. It does. So when you got an athletic commissioner coming in, well, he doesn't want to prioritize one sport over the other. So he basically has stated, we're going to stay strong in basketball, but we need to catch up in football. Phillips doesn't see it as a zero-sum decision, but suggested the ACC must prioritize its biggest revenue stream across all schools. Biggest revenue stream, football. Even in a basketball league, football makes the money. Nearly all the athletic directors and coaches we spoke to suggested the massive gaps in revenue present extensive challenges for all the schools, affecting the ability to retain assistant coaches, hire support staff, and placate fans and boosters when the SEC and the Big Ten have far deeper pockets. One AD in the SEC or in the ACC says, I have no illusion of overtaking the Big Ten or the SEC financially, but I'm optimistic that we can maintain the gap basically the optimism is to maintain the gap. Well, that doesn't sound very good.